This is the Widow Podcast, and I am Karen Sutton, the Widow Coach. I'll be supporting you through the loss of your life partner so you can find a more positive way through your grief. I want to give you hope after loss and to know that when you are ready, you can create a meaningful life for yourself with the help of me, Karen Sutton, and the Widow Podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Widow Podcast. Today I am really pleased to have the wonderful Stacy Francis with us here today. Stacy Francis is the CEO and founder of Francis Financial. She's also a certified financial planner and a certified grief coach, and has come along to talk to us a little bit about the financial implications of widowhood. They're overwhelming, they're challenging, and actually pretty scary at times. We don't often know what is best to do. So, Stacy, hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Karen, I'm so happy to be here to talk about a really important subject, and subject that's very close to my heart.
It is. I know. We've briefly chatted before. We had such a wonderful conversation. So do you tell people a little bit about you and how you came to do what you're doing, and a bit about your company?
I would love to. I really was drawn to this work. I was never a little girl who raised their hand in math. I'll be honest, numbers frightened me, but I was drawn, and I would say even pushed into this work because I saw how debilitating life can be and how many options are reduced for women who don't have a good handle on the finances of their partnership, of their marriage. And I watched my grandmother, who ended up passing away because of spousal abuse, and she never left. She explained, there are many reasons, but one of the significant factors is she felt financially trapped. And I will tell you, Karen, as a girl growing up, seeing someone who you love most dearly be hurt and feeling helpless to make a difference, it propelled me into this field because I realized that she's not the only woman, and the number of women who find themselves in really tough positions, whether it's going through a divorce, the loss or death of a husband, or disability, because we just haven't had that experience, that exposure, that education around finances. We can find ourselves in some pretty difficult positions. So I launched actually a charity in her name called Savvy Ladies, which I'll talk more about. But we've worked with tens of thousands of women pro bono, helping them get their hands around their finances. And then the year after that, 20 years ago, I launched Francis Financial to actually do one-on-one financial planning, wealth advisory for individuals all across the world. We actually have a few clients in the UK. So in my family, my husband is British. And so the UK is a very, very special place for me.
Oh, I love that. I know, because there obviously are different, laws and benefits and all that kind of stuff, aren't there, available to people in the UK, in the US. But obviously you have an understanding of that and are able to help people, whether they're in the UK or the US. And that's lovely, actually, because like you say, there is very little, I think, support out there for people that feels like it comes from a heartfelt place, and what you do definitely feels like it comes from a heartfelt place with your personal story and why you do what you do. So when you meet people in this situation, where they've lost a life partner, where do you start? What would be your kind of your first point of call?
Well, I mean, the first piece is, giving a big hug. And, I think for so many women who have lost, partners, they're in triage and often are also consoling other people.
Mm,
And whether that's children, dear family members, colleagues of the deceased. And so the first piece is really just, you taking inventory of where you're at and what help you need, because the journey that you're now taking can be extremely overwhelming. And I'll just share this story. Karen, my father-in-law passed away. Um, gosh, it's been 11, maybe 12 years ago. And we flew over to England to be with my mother-in-law, and I was the person that, jumped into all the paperwork and putting everything together to get an understanding of what their assets, liabilities, expenses were. And I will tell you that it was overwhelming for me, who was functioning at a much higher level.
mm,
Obviously, I had a loss as well, but it was my father-in-law. It wasn't my husband. And so just knowing that it's okay to feel overwhelmed, that's normal. If you don't feel overwhelmed, there's probably something wrong on the other side. That's completely normal, and that you are not going to be at your most capable place.
mm,
And so then understanding that and pulling in resources that can help you. I
yeah,
was so pleased because being able to help my mother-in-law, it gave me purpose. It gave me an ability also to deal with the loss. It allowed me to help. And so many people want to help. But Karen, I think the biggest challenge is, let me know if I can do anything. How
yes,
many times have you heard that?
yes,
Let me know if you need anything. Um, well, what I really want everyone who's listening today to know is that those people actually do want to help. They just don't know how.
mm,
So, one of the best things that you can do is start to write down all the things you need to do, which we're going to go over today, and start to bring your helpers in. And, just again, knowing, and I share this from the helper point of view, it gives us a gift, and it gives
yeah.
us an ability to deal with that loss too.
And I think, that's such a good point, isn't it? People do want to help and they don't often know how and what is helpful if they haven't been through a significant loss, and actually writing things down and thinking about what areas you could do with some help with that, it is good for others. It helps them feel like they're doing something good for you, and it helps you as well. I think the challenge a lot of people have is when it comes to finances, we can be quite private about that, can't we? It is very
Hmm.
personal, and some, our financial situations can dramatically change when a loved one dies, and some people, that you're suddenly in a situation where your household income is halved, or even more, if your person has been the breadwinner per se. There may not have been any life insurances, pensions available. So you can find yourself in real dire straits sometimes. And then on the flip side, people can find themselves actually dealing with a significant amount of wealth all of a sudden. When you do get payoffs from work, pension incomes, health insurances, life insurances, all of these things. And actually that can, that they're different problems to have 100%, but they're very overwhelming, scary problems. And who do we talk, I mean, your mother-in-law obviously trusted you and was able to allow you into that area of her life, though I do think a lot of people find it hard, don't they, to find someone, whether it's a family
Yeah.
member or a
Yeah.
friend, that they're happy to share that with.
Yeah, often it's a family member, it's a daughter, it's a son, it's a dear sister, or someone that you're very, very close to and you trust, and having them help you start to sort through the paperwork is really important, because the first step that you need to do is to get a clear picture of what your financial situation is. And it's three different areas. It's the assets, and the liabilities. So, you know, what TESAs do you have? What ISAs do you have? Um, Pensions from work. A lot of people now have like 401k, like, retirement plans at their job where they're able to put money away. Looking at what you have in checking accounts, savings accounts, if you have any, annuities or endowment policies, looking at that and also looking at there's been any payouts of life insurance of death benefits, payouts of income that was due to your spouse from their employer,
Mm.
putting all those numbers together to see what does that really look like. One of the challenges a lot of people have is they might not have their thumb on the pulse of their finances, so they may not know all the different accounts. So a trick is to, number one, look at all the mail that comes in, right? All the mail, and look at the financial institutions. If there's one account there, most likely there could be a second account. Um, Also look at your spouse's wallet, where credit cards are. Often there can be a bank account or some other account that's associated with that. That's another way. If you are able to look at the passwords for the computer, or even go into the computer to see, often the passwords are saved when you log into that website to be able to gain access to that. Um, these are all ways that you can start to piece together what that what we call balance sheet will look like, or you can call it a net worth statement, whatever works for you, assets and liabilities. And it's the same thing on the liabilities. What credit cards do you have? What does your mortgage look like? Do you have a car loan? Are there any other types of uh, loans that you have outstanding so you can put those on that balance sheet too? That's very important because your solicitor is going to need all of that information
Mm.
to make sure that everything, transfers properly for
Mm.
you.
If you discover your partner had debt and you were unaware of it, does that debt automatically transfer to you as a spouse?
Not necessarily. And so and it goes by what your estate planning says. So for most people, 100% of their assets go to their surviving spouse, right? So in that case, you know, after um, after all the liabilities are paid, you're going to get what's left of the estate. For families that are blended families, the assets may be going to a daughter from a previous marriage, or they might be going to a son from a previous marriage. So she may not be receiving 100% of those assets. So um, what's going to end up happening is that you have all the assets, that estate then pays the debts, and then what's left over is divvied up according to the will or beneficiaries that are on the accounts.
Mm.
And your beneficiary, like a retirement account, you can have a beneficiary on that, and it goes immediately to that person listed. If you have life insurance, same thing. Whoever's listed as that beneficiary, that's who's going to receive those assets. Um, and the other thing you can do is reach out to their employer, if they're currently employed or even their previous employer, to understand, do they have any retirement benefits that are there, any other type of assets. Often companies, in addition to pension plans and retirement benefits, you'll have individual stock of that company. If someone works for Google, they most likely have Google stock. If they work for HSBC, most likely they have HSBC stock as well. And just understanding what that looks like, that employer can help you, and they can also help you navigate the benefits that were offered to your your spouse and what that entitles you to today based on their death. And they can help navigate that to take some of, again, as much of the heavy lifting off your plate. So the first piece is really just understanding that full picture of what the finances look like now with the assets and liabilities. And the second piece is understanding what your new income is going to be, which you're 100% right, Karen. For the vast majority of people, it's changed and it's not changed for the positive. It goes down. If your spouse was receiving a pension, it may completely stop. Or if it does continue, it might continue at a lower amount. If they were working, that income is going to completely stop. So, getting a better understanding of what is my new household income is really important. And the third piece is understanding what are my expenses. And, um, you know, for most individuals, their expenses do go down eventually, but the time period right after having lost a spouse is unfortunately a very expensive time. You have all the funeral costs, you have burial costs, you have all these pieces, and then you also potentially have legal costs for hiring your solicitor. And it can feel very frightening to have to pay these big bills when you are seeing your income go down. And so one of the best gifts you can give to yourself is to get a handle on what your expenses look like,
Mm,
and then look at what the income is and see how much of a gap there is.
mm, mm.
And it may be fine to have that gap. It could be that you receive life insurance money. It could be that, you end up, many women we've worked with end up going back to work, or, doing something in the gig economy and working part-time and doing that, especially if they're young and they still have another 40, 50 years, even 60 years of their life. But just looking at it and knowing is, while it can be hard to do, it also takes some of the anxiety away. And, not to make light of it, but just like in the, you know, way that we all think about jumping on the scale after a vacation,
Yeah.
we kind of all are like, I did it today, and I was kind of like looking, and I looked at the number and it wasn't that bad. And I was like, you know what? It could have been worse. But the anxiety I had of like what that number was going to be
Yeah.
far outweighed what I really should be worrying about. And so again, it's kind of making light of it, but just kind of like understanding where you're sitting now
Yeah.
can help you start to formulate, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to do next?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, isn't it? And we all do it. We avoid getting on the scales, and you get on, and you're like, oh no. But I think n- knowledge is power, essentially, and I think we can all be very good at avoiding things that feel scary and overwhelming, and we all want to bury our head in the sand sometimes, don't we? And just pretend these things aren't going on. Of course, especially we're in the midst of grief, and it's just so
Yeah,
heavy. Um, but you're right, until you've got the hard facts and the knowledge about where you're at and what you're doing, we're not then able to make informed choices. The kind of, the choices that empower us to make decisions that will help us take those all important steps forward and start to just put some of the pieces very tentatively back together, and
yeah, I agree.
understand the position that you find yourself in. And you're right, it's not what you want. It's never what you want, is it? Nobody's asked for this, to be in this situation facing these
Yeah,
challenges.
yeah,
um but by hiding from them, sometimes it does cause so much anxiety, doesn't it? And then you're layering it
yeah,
with more.
yeah. I feel like women in particular, we are our superpower is worrying. And I don't know. Um, Often when we think about the future, we we think of a future that's worse than actually is reality.
Yeah.
And just painting that more clear picture allows you to have that true north point of, okay, this is what it looks like. And this is where I want to go, and starts to help you put the pieces in place to
Yeah.
get to that place where you are feeling financially secure, that you're feeling financially confident and empowered and on track. Because not knowing, we tend to, our brain tends to just, go and catastrophize, what really isn't going to happen, but we worry about. So I think that's really important. And, once you have a clear picture of what your finances look like, um, you know, take a breath, and I would say take 6 months before you make any significant decisions. That means take 6 months before you put the house on the market.
Mm.
Take 6 months before you launch back into the workforce or the economy. Take 6 months before you decide to move in with your daughter or whatever that might be. Just to give yourself some breathing space,
Mm.
really important. I see the biggest mistakes made
Mm.
right after a death, and it's almost like a gut reaction.
Yes.
And I'll give an example. One of our clients, she, lovely woman, ended up buying a vacation home with the life insurance money. And it sounds, I'm sure, and I really don't want anyone listening to be judging her. The reason she did it is that it was right next door to the home where her brother lives. And she wanted her twin daughters to be near their cousin after this loss and close to their uncle and their aunt.
Mm.
Made 100% sense. But she did this very quickly within a month or two. And then once we were able to really look at the finances, she can't afford it. And it was a really hard conversation to have with her, and we're going to make it work. We are going to rent the house out during certain parts of the, year. We're going to refinance it when, mortgage rates come down. She's going to go back to work now that the girls are getting ready to start to go to school. So it's all going to work out. But what ended up happening, which felt like the right thing, it ended up adding more pressure for her. Whereas what she could have done is maybe rented a place
Mm. Mm.
during the summers when the girls were not at school, in
Yeah.
2020 hindsight, of course, but
Mm.
just, giving ourselves that space
Mm.
to not feel like we have to make those big decisions. And I've seen it with um, some of our clients selling the house, which is too big for them. That's right. But then moving in with their daughter, and they never got along before. And now that they're under the same roof, really not getting along either.
Mm.
So, just giving yourself that time and to really, really think through that. And a lot of these decisions are quite frankly financially motivated,
Mm.
doing things to try and save money or make sure that they're financially secure. And just as, making sure you know what your assets, liabilities are, your income and your expenses, there are plenty of fantastic financial advisors
Mm.
in the UK.
Mm.
And what I would say is look for the CFP credential, Certified Financial Planner. That person has a more broad scope that's going to be able to help you. Some people really only understand about investing, which is important for you. You need to invest your money. You need to have it work for you now more than ever because you might be a little bit more financially behind than you were before. But you also need someone who can help run different scenarios about if I stay in the house, if I sell, if I go back to work, if I stay retired, all these things, am I going to be able to be financially secure when I'm 85, when I'm 90, when I'm 95? And for us ladies, I don't want anyone out there listening to say, I'm not going to live till 95, because guess what?
Mm.
Of all the people out there, You will be the one.
Mm,
And you want to make sure that you can be financially secure and that you don't have to rely on your children. Of course, I'm sure they'll help you if they can, but that that is a really tough position to put kids in, and it's a tough position for you to be in too.
yeah. It's so true, isn't it? And I think we can very much have a knee-jerk reaction, can't we, to the loss and make decisions, big decisions. And I have spoken to some people, I've had some clients that have sold their house quite quickly after their spouse has died. And actually it's worked out really well. It's been the best thing they could ever have done. However, I do think it is good, isn't it, to just take that time to make your choices if they're big choices, and just giving yourself that little bit of breathing space to make sure it is, it's I wanted to move after my husband died. I was like, I didn't want to get out of here. I want to move. I was looking for houses. But I could have done quite easily, but I decided not to, and I'm so glad I'm still here, and it's my sanctuary and I love it. But it could have been a very different story
Mm,
had I, reacted to my emotions in that moment, because it gets heavy, it gets hard.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think we feel like a big change like that can take away some of our pain,
yeah,
understandably. And it doesn't, it can sometimes, it can definitely be the right thing sometimes, but if it's meant to be, then taking a little time just to make sure it's still going to be the right decision.
yeah,
6 months
yeah,
isn't always such a bad thing. But there's also a lot of nervousness, isn't there, Stacey, around finding a financial planner, because there's so many sort of stories, aren't there, about people being blindsided and ripped off, and people disappearing with their money. And when we don't understand, fine. I mean, I didn't, my husband Simon did all of our finances. Luckily, we had a financial advisor that worked with us as a married couple. And then when Simon died, I stayed with him. So I already had that inbuilt trust, and I knew him, and he's been incredible. But if you haven't got that, if you don't have that person and you don't know anyone, you can still go out there, can't you, and look for someone, and
yeah.
see they've got the right qualifications and stuff. But how do we know? What advice do you kind of give to people, when they're looking for someone? Is there, I know you said about looking for the
Yeah.
CFP, but
So, um, I'm really glad that you brought this up because the book that I wrote, Financial Help for Widows, it goes through all the things that we just spoke about today of, kind of shortcuts to get the assets. And I actually have some fantastic worksheets that you can use that lay it out really, really beautifully. But it also has how to find a financial advisor. And what I do is I give you the questions to ask. Because, I mean, most people, this is not something that you've done before. And it gives you the questions to ask to understand what is their experience level. You
mm,
want someone who's been doing this work ideally for a decade or more. Do they work with clients like you? Widows?
mm, mm,
Yes or no? Do they feel comfortable working with women?
mm,
Because we as women, it's not just about investing. It's just not about the dollar and cents. There's so much more to what makes us feel financially secure. And we want to make sure that we can have a open, honest conversation with our financial advisor.
mm,
And a lady that just started working with us, and we were going through her budget, and she said, I'm so happy you're ladies because that doctor expense is really my Botox. And let's just be honest. And, we need to know that. If that's an expense, we need to have that in your budget. And
mm,
she had been disguising it, and the gentleman was like, oh, you have a lot of doctor expenses. Are you healthy? Do we need to adjust your life expectancy in your plan? And she's like, yeah, well, so you really want to work with someone who you you can feel comfortable with, and you'll want them to have the right designations, and the CFP is one of them. and there are several others as well. Um, and it really helps just making sure that who you're hiring is someone that's going to do a great job for you, that's going to be a great partner. How do you find that person? Ask your friends. Becoming a widow, you're joining, unfortunately, a club no one wants to join, but it's a pretty crowded club. And these other women have had the exact same concerns as you
Mm.
and have gone out there and hired an advisor. In fact, this statistic, Karen, you're actually in the minority. 80% of women leave their financial advisor within 1 year of their spouse's death.
Wow, do they?
They do, and it's typically because the relationship was more so with their husband.
Yeah,
And they really want a relationship to be with
yeah.
her, with themselves. And so kudos to your financial advisor because it means that he's done a great job of working with the two of you and making sure that you were included in that couple, and that's not always the case.
Mm.
So ask other women who have unfortunately, become widows as well, who do they recommend, and then interview them. It's a great way to find someone that's going to be a good fit. And like I said, the financial help for widows, it's a free guide, and it's beautifully laid out. Actually, it was very exciting. I got to see the first physical copy yesterday, and it was not quite the birth of my children because that was more important, but it was very exciting to see, and it's beautifully laid out. And what's really special about it is that within there are stories from other women too,
Yeah.
which that's what warms my heart most of sharing what they did feel like they did right and their words of wisdom or things that they wish they had done differently in their words of wisdom there too. Um, and talking about words of wisdom, I really want to go back to getting help. One of the pieces that I've heard over and over again from our clients, and it's not financial, but one of the hardest things to do is to call the alma mater, the associations, the sports club, the cricket club, the whatever, the magazine subscriptions, the credit cards, the all of these things. It can be
Mm.
dozens and dozens and dozens of different organizations that you have to reach out to notify them of the death of your spouse. And it can be excruciating to have to call and say, my husband has passed away, and over and over and over again. And so what they'll do is they will have one of those friends who say, can I help? And they'll say, can you please call the golf club? This is the number. Can you please, do this? And each person has a list
Mm.
of 5 or 10 um, things, and it can be very helpful. And the other thing I hear that is extremely helpful is all those thank you notes.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
over just very, very hard. I was able to write them for my father when my mother passed away. He couldn't do it. And so if they can write thank you notes for you, it's a wonderful way to help you. And it's also a wonderful way for your dear friends and family that want to help you. So, trying to get all those things off your plate as much as possible. If there's someone who's handy, have them be your person who comes in to fix things. I'll be honest, my husband passed away. If he passed away, I'm not so sure I could get the TV on at all times because there's so many remotes and so many buttons. And usually I can, but every once in a while I press the wrong button and it's like, what did I do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are all things to think about of having people be able to help and be able to support as you're moving forward. So it's not really financial, but there's a lot of great ideas, in that guide to lift the burden for you and, also for other people to be able to help. Because I mean, in the US, what we do is we make casseroles or cookies for people,
Yes.
which is so lovely. But there's like a point where like you have so much food. It's just like like that it's too much,
Yeah.
right? You can only have so many
Exactly.
cookies.
I think over here that the kind of go-to meal for grief is lasagna. And I was just spoken to one of my other podcast guests who said it was like a game of Tetris with lasagna in his freezer, just like balancing them all on top of
To
each
try
other.
get them to
Where can they
fit.
fit in?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah. And there's a point where you start to hate lasagna,
yeah, yeah, no
right?
more. Absolutely. Yeah, he was like,
Yeah,
I never want to see another one.
I
But yeah,
know.
I think that's really, really good advice. And asking for that help, giving people jobs to do, that's such a good job. I hear so many widows talking on social media in my groups, saying that they've had to sit down and make all these calls, and sometimes making those calls, the person you speak to on the other side is obviously following a script, or there's a policy of some sort, but it just lacks common sense. And
Yeah,
they will say something like, well, I need to speak to the person, but he's dead, or well, I need the PIN number, well, I haven't got it, he's dead. Like, it's like, well, I can't do anything. You just like, you
yeah. No, I
feel,
know. I
oh,
know.
you're like, dealing with that when you're grieving, it's too much. And I think if
It's like it's re-traumatizing,
it is.
right? It's re-traumatizing, and then it's creating this like anger because people are well-meaning, but they say the stupidest things, right? They say the stupidest things, and they mean well.
Yeah,
They mean well. But
yeah.
boy, it's like just putting another knife in your heart. And if you can have any help on
Mhm.
dealing with, there'll be certain things. So when you're talking to financial institutions and closing, let's say, a joint account that's in both of your names, it's going to most likely need to be you.
Yeah.
Um, but, there are many, many, many other calls that you don't have to make. I want to give another resource because I know I know we're coming up to time. I really want to offer the resource of Savvy Ladies. And I mentioned that when we first started speaking. Savvy Ladies, we have women all across the world that come to our website. It's savvyladies.org, and it has two V's because it's super savvy. Um, all of our resources are free of charge. We're a charity here in the US. We also don't income test. So whether you have a dollar in your pocket or a pound in your pocket or you do not, we can help you. And we have hundreds of TED Talk like videos on finances and everything from budgeting expenses, saving for retirement, recovery after the loss of a spouse. And we have the only helpline in the world where you can be matched up with a certified financial planner and work one-on-one free of charge. And this year already, we've made over 1,500 matches between women and volunteer certified financial planners. And so you can talk on the phone together for an hour, you can do a Zoom call for an hour, but it's such a good investment because you can read a book, you can watch shows about finances, you can do all of this, but often there's still, Karen, the question of like my personal situation that you have questions about. And it's a great resource for you. It's not in place of a financial advisor. They're not going to be, investing in the stock market for you ongoing. That's not really what Savvy Ladies is all about. But it's a great place to get the answers you need right now.
Do you know, I
And
think that like that, and I will put all of these in the show notes, the Savvy Ladies, and a link to your book as well, because they're just incredible resources. But you're right, sometimes you just want that little bit of advice, don't you, in terms of, say you've come into some money, you've got to live now, you've got to save something for the future. Maybe you want to make a big investment or go on a special holiday with the kids or something. But it's like,
yeah,
can I really afford to? Like, yes, the money's there. Like, I can see it's physically there. I can do it. But what impact is taking like a chunk of it out now going to have on my income or my pension? And these are big questions. And a lot of people then don't make the choices, don't do the things, and living in the now and going on the holidays, and having those experiences out of fear of God, what if I
Yeah.
have money, what if it all disappears, and that reassurance I think that we all need sometimes when you haven't got somebody to have those conversations with, to make sure that you're making a joint decision, you're on the same page, you both agree that it's a sensible thing to do. All of a sudden it's all on you, it's all on you,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
scary. And just having the opportunity to talk, whether you're investing something, is that a good idea, what should I be looking for, can I spend my money, where can I save, all of those things that, yeah, they're big questions, aren't they, that you want to be able to trust someone in
Yeah.
what they're going to be saying to you. And a lot of the time when we speak to family and friends, they're giving us advice from an emotional point of view, from a spend the money, do the thing, whatever makes you happy. But actually, you sometimes want that outside advice, don't you, from somebody that's not emotionally
Yeah. Family
attached.
members can be unbelievably well-meaning, and they are not financial advisors. And so what I what I ask everyone listening today is to close your eyes. If you're driving, do not close your eyes. But if you're not driving, close your eyes and think about a future of you in 5 years where you feel financially secure, you're on track. Every dollar you spend, you feel confident about because you understand that you can afford it, that you have a clear picture about how much money you have, what you can spend, and what you need to do to stay long term on that financial security track. That's an amazing gift. Every person deserves that, especially someone who has gone through a loss. And financial security is not going to bring back the love of your life, but what it will do, it's going to give you that warm blanket
Yeah.
of security to allow you to start that new life
Mm.
and to be able to, you know, live the best life you can and really, you know, be there for yourself and, be there for your loved ones.
I think that's so lovely, Stacey. And I think that was the one thing I really admired about my financial advisor, who obviously had been mine and Simon's. And, when we sat down eventually to talk about finances after Simon died, he asked me, he said, "What do you want? What do you want for the now? What do you want for the future? How do
Yeah.
you?" And I thought, he wasn't sat there telling me what he thought I should be doing, or or really you need this here and that was very much like, tell me the kind of life that you want, the things you want to be able to afford to do, and let's see how we can make these things happen for you and make sure you're protected through all of it. And we can lose that, I think,
Yeah.
with finances, because we want somebody to tell us what to do because we have absolutely no idea. But it does come back to you. What do you
Hmm.
want? What life do you want to live? What experiences and
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's what's so exciting about being a financial advisor because you're the person who tells us what
mm,
you want your life to look like. And then our job is to translate that into numbers
yeah, yes.
and to make a recipe, a roadmap to follow to get there.
Yes.
So, but if it's the other way where the financial advisor is kind of pushing in,
Mm,
it's it's not going to work. It
mm,
has to come from you of what that looks like. And you don't have to think about numbers. You just, what does that life look like? What are the things that are important? Then our job again is to translate that into numbers and to figure out that roadmap, create that financial plan, the investment portfolio that's going to earn X, Y, and Z to support it.
mm,
Um, you know,
yeah.
you, the biggest job you guys have is and I'll be honest, it's a big job because it's very hard to think about, well, what do I want?
Mm,
And knowing that it's going to change
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
What you might feel today can be very different
Yeah.
in 2 months, 3 months. It can be even very different tomorrow or this afternoon. right? So just understanding and knowing that things will change and that's okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a very good point. Things do change, and I think that
yeah.
sometimes makes us a bit scared of making a choice, a decision at any point, because you think, well, I want it now, but will that still be the same in, in a week, a month, a year? But it always comes back to remembering that at any one moment you are doing the best that you can, and that is good enough, and going with what you need in a moment, knowing that it will absolutely change, but that's okay too. Stacey, you have shared so much. It has been wonderful talking to
Thank
you.
you.
So much knowledge and wisdom. And I love that you're also a grief coach. I think that just must enrich what you do so much, and give people that comfort when they talk to you, because it's not easy to talk about grief. We do live in a grief illiterate society, and the fact that you've done that to support your clients, I think, really does show what
Oh, thank you.
person you are, and how much you
Mm,
put to help. So that is lovely. So I will share, like I say, on the show notes,
wonderful.
how people can get hold of all the resources you've talked about here. And obviously how they can contact you if they want to contact you for anything at all. And just thank you so much, Stacey. What you have shared here will be invaluable to many. I know it will. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm giving everybody a hug.
Me too.
Thank you so much for listening to the Widow podcast with me, Karen Sutton. If you would like to be part of a supportive community of people who understand your grief, come and join my free Facebook group, Widowed and Rising. And make sure you tune in to the next episode of the Widow podcast.